Hey everybody, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse, and you're watching the Investor Club Bonus Stories.
So we just got off the line with Thomas Dusha. He is the CEO and co-founder of Swobbee over in Germany. They make these swappable battery cabinets where if you're an e-cargo bike rider, you can go over there, swap out your battery real quick. It's a lot like the company Gogoro that we talk a lot about over in Taiwan. And this is a much smaller company than that. They don't have as many locations or battery swap stations. Looks like they have about 62 stations that they're currently talking about, probably more than they're showing.
Right. I mean, so basically in our interview, there's the public stations that they have on their map, and then there's private stations where they don't want to disclose the location because it's only for basically one company or a couple companies to have their riders walk up to those stations and swap the batteries, and they don't want anyone else tampering with it.
About 40 or 50 employees right now. What I really liked was Thomas is the kind of leader who's not really holding things too close to the vest. I really enjoy that. I love someone who's willing to share stories, personal stories, things where he says I was wrong or I didn't understand that. That shows me a level of plasticity in the brain, the ability to say like, oh, I thought this, but then I learned that. So I really like that in a CEO. I like the fact that he was like, what do we need to do? Or the fact that they're putting out this like 1 year long study of what the consumers want. Like we know what businesses want, but we don't really know. So let's see what the consumers want. Really smart that he's collecting that data. I feel like this is one of those things where you might be saying, well, Zach, I mean, he didn't really say I could get in on this company unless I'm like a big investor. He didn't say anything about going public. Well, first of all, that's not the whole point of what we do here on Investor Club, right?
It's not, here's the thing. It's not always the companies that we talk to that are the ones that are interesting.
Right.
It's that we're talking about a space.
Right.
And so it basically just helps us understand what the space looks like in a particular place. So in this case, we're talking about more specifically cargo bike. Not even, forget the swapping stations for a second, cargo bikes in city centers, using Berlin as a little case study. What was it throughout Europe? 100,000 cargo bikes being sold?
It's exploding. And so if you're an American watching right now, you might be like, I've never even seen one of these things.
And especially if you're an American who hasn't been able to travel to Europe because of, I don't know why, then you probably haven't seen this because it's developed in that time span.
Now, let's just think about some big companies right now. So if I'm Amazon...
Forget Swobbee for a second.
Yeah, forget Swobbee. Think about if you're Amazon, Walmart, UPS, FedEx, like DHL, any company that needs to move packages around, okay? You typically do it with a big fleet of vans and trucks. Once you get into a city, those vans and trucks become less and less useful because it's individual points that you have to bring those to. And each time you stop that big van, you got to double park it. The guy has to jump out, open the back of the van. You've seen it. It takes a long time. Way smarter, way faster, way cheaper to do it on an e-cargo bike. And that's what these companies are finding out now. So now as an investor, you might be thinking, well, okay, so how do I use this information? How does this help me? Well, you can be looking at companies who are getting into this space. And so if, let's say, Amazon gets into that space first, you can say, oh, well, this might be the better place to put my money because they get how to do it cheaper.
And then you can say, oh, what kind of bikes is Amazon buying? And can I get in on that company?
Or it might go all the way back to the mining again. You might go, well, gee, now it's not just Teslas that are using lithium and graphite and nickel. It's all these other companies. And you might think to yourself, okay, so what kind of batteries does an e-cargo bike need? Well, it needs as light as possible, as high as energy density as possible. You don't want to put a lithium iron phosphate battery in there because it's going to be less energy dense. And so you're going to have more weight. I think you're going to want as high a nickel content as possible. And so that's another reason to be thinking about all the other companies we talk about, like Nouveau Monde or Gigametals.
Because this is a snowballing thing. When you have something that is nice, that is good, and that people want, it tends to snowball. And what do I mean by this? I think that in certain places of the world, we're starting to see electric cargo bikes. They're not very prevalent right now, and so just like the Tesla Roadster back in 2011
That's a really
and 12,
good way to think of it.
It was like, it's a what? It's a huh? I remember being alive back then and hearing about it, and it was just like, you didn't, oh, what was that? I didn't hear it. Now, everyone's being clobbered over the head with it. Have you heard about EVs? Clonk.
Right.
Much different. What has happened in that span of time is that we've just been, A, developing technology, B, it's gaining more interest. Obviously, you have companies like Tesla who are actually producing them. Producing an electric cargo bike is so much easier than producing an electric car.
There's I don't think any safety things you have to worry about.
Right.
And the size and weight of the thing is so much lower.
It doesn't have to be automotive grade stuff, right? The doors don't have to be automotive grade. The whole thing can rattle. That's fine.
And I mean, what did Thomas keep talking about? He talked about that there was a limit to the amount of materials that they could get to make these bikes. So he was talking about lithium and all these things. So again, if you're thinking that EVs is the future, you can double down on the fact that all of these things that go into EVs also go into e-bikes.
And then what happens when cities start to want to adopt these? When they say, hey, we do want to get the trucks out of the city centers for pollution, for noise pollution, for just general traffic.
Demand skyrockets.
What are they going to do? He already was talking about how in Berlin, they added a ton of bike lanes. What happens when you add bike lanes? The people who love urbanization are screaming already. You've created induced demand, right? So you know how everyone's like, don't add more lanes to a highway. That will just create more traffic, right? Because suddenly everyone goes, hey, the 405 doesn't have any traffic.
Right.
I'll take my car. As soon as there's a ton of bike lanes everywhere, everyone goes, hey, there's these bike lanes everywhere. I want to take my bike. I might not have a bike.
Right.
I want an e-bike. I want to upgrade my bike into something that I want now. This is the exploding market that we're seeing. And as more people get e-bikes, because they're becoming more viable, even in places where there's absolutely no biking infrastructure, and I can tell you that firsthand, that means more people getting e-bikes. That means more people want the bike lanes. It's a snowballing thing.
And not only that, if you think about how many more e-bikes replace cars, you get to replace parking spaces, you get to replace parking structures, you get to change how people dress. Like, there's going to be changes in how people buy sneakers and buy hats and buy clothing. It all changes when you change this. And so that's why, as an investor, you need to be ahead of this curve. And that's why we bring you people like this who are on the cutting edge of what's going on. So even if we're not going to invest in Swobbee,
exactly,
we want you to see from boots on the ground, someone who's telling you what's actually going on the ground.
Because this is really all I care about when we're talking to you, our investor club. I don't want to say, buy. Take this company. I do not, because A, we're not financial advisors, not even legal for us to tell you to do that.
Right.
Secondly, you're in your own place in the world. I want to help you think. I want to help you imagine what the world is going to look like in 5 years, in 10 years, because that's what being an investor is.
Exactly.
If you could have predicted the major disruptions that have already occurred, cell phones, smartphones, cars, even if you were, if you're that old, no one's that old, if you could have made investments that were wise investments based on the future that you could foresee, you would be in a much better place as an investor. And that's all I want to do. I want to think about the future.
Everyone talks about Peter Lynch as being this amazing American investor who basically said what? Know your product, right? Go to the grocery store. The things that you're buying, invest in those things. This is what we're talking about here, except we're going beyond the grocery store market idea to things that you probably aren't involved in. Like if you live in America and you don't know about e-cargo bikes, right? We're trying to tell you about those items that no one really knows about yet. And so you're on the lookout for the first time that you can get in on those products. So it may be a year or two before you find the right company you can get in on, but I promise you'll probably be one of the first and you'll understand it the best. And so you'll have the highest potential reward for getting in early.
And this is going to sound kind of weird. As an investor, I think that you owe it to yourself to rent an e-bike.
Yep. I totally agree. And I don't even think you have to rent one. A lot of bike places will let you take them for test rides.
I think I just want you to experience it, just like I would want you to experience a Tesla Model 3 before you invested in Tesla. That would be, I am just saying, experience it And I do think rent it. Go for a ride that you normally wouldn't have been able to do. The nice part is a lot of these bike rental places are near a nice bike path. Find a nice bike path.
It'll change your life. I'm almost
It's
positive.
going to change your perspective. I'm not saying like, oh, I want you to buy an e-bike. I do, but I mean, obviously, we're investors here. It's just to get the experience and to just get the experience that I've had riding tons of different e-bikes where I go, oh, this is a game changer. This is such a more pleasant way to get around.
And even scooters. Think about taking, if there's in your city, if there's Lime or one of those other brands, or again, maybe renting one, just because it really does change. I just did this the past few days. I rode around Boston, a bunch of the neighborhoods. And it's just lovely. It's just, you get to feel it differently. You get to explore places you've never been. It's at the speed with which you want. So you can stop at any moment and just put the kickstand down and go run into a restaurant or go into a store. Like, it's just a different way than with a car. With a car, it's like, oh, can we park over here? No, we can't.
And I don't want it to be a surprise to you when it starts to happen. And I know.
Can I also just say, when we were riding our scooters, I cannot tell you how many times we would ride by someone and they go, that looks like fun, or stop someplace and like, what are those?
Are those electric?
How far do they go?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I mean, so many people had no idea what they were just like, is this the future? And I was like, don't you know about these things? But no, most people don't. They know about kick scooters from, the past, like kids ones, like a Razor scooter, but they don't know about these scooters.
And so what I'm saying is, look, you do not need to invest in any e-bike company, e-scooter company, Swobbee. You don't need to invest in any of this stuff.
Just know about it.
Just know about it. So that way, when you are in the position to make the right move, it might be completely tangential to this, right? Like you were talking about with clothing. Oh, I want to get in on some clothing brand that is specifically tailored to, outdoorsy stuff.
Right.
I mean, obviously there's brands that exist today, but they've created a new fabric. It's good for e-biking.
Well, I mean, you remember with Under Armour and a bunch of other brands when things got to be, really in for a while in different kinds of sports, those things cross over into just regular people who don't do those sports.
Right.
So when, some kind of e-bike fashion hits, you'll be like, oh, I get it because I know what's going on.
Right. Or maybe it's something that I'm not even thinking of yet. Right. It's most likely that. I really like this interview. It was so nice to gain mostly his perspective. I think that was really, really valuable to see, because he's right in the thick of it. It's so nice to talk to people.
Did you also notice a difference between this interview and our interview with Autonomy? I mean, these are two recent interviews, right? And the Autonomy interview was a very heavily scripted, like, I'm going to give you all our marketing points. This interview with Thomas from Swobbee was much less like, oh, here's what we're doing and you have to invest and blah, blah, blah. In fact, he didn't even really want to give us those numbers. And that's a generally good sign that a CEO knows that things are good and he doesn't really want to share too much. So even though he was open with us about what's going on in his city and stuff like that, he wasn't really pushing this whole narrative of we're this big and we have 20% of the market share, blah, blah. It was a completely different feel than Autonomy, where basically he was almost trying to sell you on the fact that you need to, it's almost just trying to get you into an autonomy. And I like to notice those differences.
Yeah. I mean, and again, take with it what you will. The value of this is what you glean from it. It's not what I tell you.
And the big value here is to go over to Slack. If you have not been on our Slack and you're like, oh my God, I hear them talking about this, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It is an app. You can put it on your computer or on your phone. You
don't even have to install it.
It seems overwhelming. I get it.
You can do it in the browser.
But try it. Please take 20 minutes and try it, because I think you'll get hooked. Once you're over there, it's a wonderful community of your fellow Investor Club members who are talking about all the things we're talking about. And you can just look from afar if you want to, not even talk, and just read. But when you feel like it, when you feel comfortable, you can put your 2 cents in there. And it's a nice environment. This isn't the internet, okay? This isn't a bunch of just randos from all over the world who are just going to be mean. These are our friends here. We're all a community. And we can put, maybe something about one of these areas. You're like, hey, I work in this field. That's amazing information to have, because we don't probably work in your field. So even putting that in there could be so useful for everyone else. And if we're all doing that all the time, that's why Slack is so powerful. I go on there sometimes and I'm like,
wow,
whoa,
I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
5 minutes later, I know a lot more.
Yeah. And if you are just reading, Slack has this really fun little emoji thing. So you can
give a thumbs up,
click a little thumbs up, or a little
face, or
laughing face. That way you don't have to say anything, but it just lets the people who are, kind of discussing and thinking about stuff know that what they're saying is valuable.
Right.
So thank you so much for being a part of our investor club. I hope that this is bringing you some value. We're going to be bringing you obviously a lot more interviews and stuff like that. And thank you to people who reach out to us with companies that you want.
Swobbee is one of them.
Yeah.
I think one of our German viewers said, "Hey, this is a really interesting company. Reach out to them." I had never heard of them, and I really value you guys for doing that because we don't know everything. So it's
Exactly.
because of you guys that we got to interview him.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Now you know.